Well, hi everyone, and thanks for joining us today. When an AI system does exactly what it is designed to do, but produces a catastrophic unintended outcome, who is actually at fault? The coder, the user, the governance framework? Not sure. Today's guest has spent 20 years answering these kinds of questions in really high stake environments, from global tech giants to indeed the frontline of public safety. Sandy, you've had what looks like a very, very interesting career. I wouldn't mind if you could please introduce yourself and just let us know a bit about your history before we start.
Thank you, Hayden. Thank you for the opportunity and thank you for having me here today. And my career has largely been at the intersection of strategy, architecture, delivery, operational governance rather than cybersecurity in isolation. But across police, emergency services, government, and now my current work with AKURIS, one thing has become really increasingly obvious. If AI is going to be deployed at scale, security and governance cannot be bolted on later. They are central to trust, operational resilience, and responsible adoption. So, what has changed recently is the pace. AI is accelerating how quickly vulnerabilities are found and how convincingly phishing and social engineering can be executed, and how smaller weaknesses can be chained together. That means executives and boards also need to become much more disciplined about cyber fundamentals and evidence based oversight. So, this has been my recent 3 to 4 years of an interest within the cybersecurity governance and also with the innovation space. So, that is currently my role where I'm helping organizations to come to this kind of an understanding of balancing the innovation along with the security and the regulation elements.
And whereabouts did you start your career, Sandy? Or your career
I've
in IT at
started,
least?
yes, I've started off with Oracle Corporation. I was a hands-on programmer initially
Wow.
with the Java J2EE and Oracle technologies, and then moved on into the private sector industries like General Electric and also Phillips, where I had much more insights into how technology can enable business. And since then, I moved to Queensland Government, worked in the public sector predominantly, mostly within the public safety and law enforcement organizations, and also now more recently into AKURIS, which is a private sector but does global kind of AI innovation transformation in the digital space for all the clients, both public and private sector entities.
Wow. Nice. Awesome. This is a question that we try and ask all of our guests. And I know you aren't a traditional like cybersecurity necessarily type of person, but when I say a cyber win, I am referring to cyber as in the old school way of talking about cyber, like cyberspace rather than just cybersecurity. So I'd love if you could talk to me a bit about a cyber win that you've experienced recently.
One example that comes to my mind is the AI work at a Queensland public sector that I have led and also implemented. So, while it might not seem like a very traditional cyber story, the real challenge was ensuring AI could be introduced safely into a sensitive operational environment. And I believe that the turning point was recognizing that capability was moving faster than governance and control. So we focused on putting in place the right foundations, including the governance frameworks, approval pathways, and structured delivery from use case to the production. And I think from a cyber perspective, it was about making sure AI didn't introduce new unmanaged risks through data integration or access. The outcome was that AI adoption became something that the organization could trust and scale rather than series of isolated proof of concepts or experiments. For me, that's the real win. It's not just deploying capability, but doing it in a way that it is secure, governed, and operationally reliable. And when I first started taking this kind of an assignment, all I was told was we need the blessings of the cybersecurity team. Little did I know that how complex the whole entire journey would be. but I completely understand why it is more relevant and why it is more significant, because the journey and the experience taught me that it is not just some assessments or some threat and risk assessments, those kind of things that are required, but fundamentally understanding what are the core concepts into getting an initiative from the ideation to the production. So it had a lot of controls that were involved, and understanding what are the guardrails, what are the frameworks, what are the key action items, and who are the responsible officers who had to be involved in this journey, and what are the stakes if things go wrong with that kind of sensitive information. And it taught me a lot about the importance and significance of cybersecurity, particularly in the days of AI, because it is not just about getting outcomes in the innovation days, but it is also ensuring the capability of security and governance, which will obviously lead to trust.
Mm. So a really interesting point. It's like the opportunity of using AI, having chatbots to help your staff and all that kind of stuff is massive. Huge productivity benefits. Potentially looking at having to have lower costs because certain overheads can be automated and all that kind of stuff. But on the other hand, especially in the industries that you're talking about, looking at like if it's the police services or ambulance, like police, you've got maybe figuring out which data can be accessed. You have evidence there, investigations, ambulance service. You've got people's private healthcare and health information and all that kind of stuff. It's interesting. I've spoken to a few people about how the difficulties of setting up things like chatbots for their internal staff. And if I'm the CTO or the CFO, can I ask the chatbot to give me something that I shouldn't see in my office? How do you manage that? And yeah, it's a big and scary thing. So I'm glad you're looking at it in a positive light, because it's kind of scary for me sometimes, though. I do think that technology is catching up. The security of it is catching up. People are less likely to just hit AI with the ban hammer, saying no, we can't use any chatbots in our business. Turn off ChatGPT, turn off Claude, all that kind of stuff, and they're realizing there's more intelligent ways, and vendors are catching up, and service providers and all that kind of stuff. And naturally, that must be, I'm sure, a big part of what you do in your business and in your consulting, is figuring out how to make that work really well. It's certainly not going away. So I guess we'll just have to make sure that we match the speed of technology advancing with our innovation. So awesome, great. That's very exciting. Going to move away a little bit from that. So you came from pretty big tech giants. You came from places like Oracle and GE. They're pretty different to like frontline emergency services and various other enterprise sort of spaces. So coming from those big tech giants, and of course you may have been different in different roles as well. But what was the biggest kind of culture shock you experienced when trying to implement enterprise grade systems in the emergency services from coming across from somewhere like Oracle or GE? Was it a big change, or did you slide right in?
Yes.
And
There was a big change, because I was working with organizations where they were cutting edge technologies, bleeding edge technologies. It is all the advancement of technology space where we as a team always used to be curious to know what is the next best idea that we can actually do, like programmatically or with respect to the application wise. And it was more focusing on improving the performance. For example, like in one of the application that I worked for, Oracle Corporation, it's about how can we improve the speed and performance of an application where back in those days it has always been slow with respect to the accessibility when you are trying to write large stored procedures or functions. And when I have been with that kind of a mindset, how can we simplify, and what is the next innovation, that what are the indexing tools that we could use in the programmatic sense, and shift direction from that kind of a mindset to the public sector. It has been really insightful, I would say, to understand how technology can help and support business decisions, and what are the business outcomes that I could see, and what is it that we, from the ICT environment, being behind the scenes in the background, are helping enable the frontline officers do their jobs, and which in turn is saving the community outcomes. But also, one way that I thought about is when I was working for Queensland Fire and Emergency Services, and which is like, we use this life cycle approach to incident management, where it is all about, prodroma, which is like early warning signs, and prepare, prevent, respond, and recover. And what I have realized is that it is the same thinking applies very well to any kind of an ICT transformation or even to cyber resilience. So when I have got this opportunity where we had to implement few of those things, like the business led kind of approach to the ICT technology or even cybersecurity, it is always on these fundamental life cycle management approach, like prodrama, which is about the early signals. In a cyber context, if we apply that, that might be an unusual system behavior or emerging vulnerabilities, or even small indicators that something is not quite right. Then you have preparation, which is your architecture, access controls, and operational readiness. And prevention, which is reducing attack surface and strengthening core controls. And response, which is the ability to contain and manage the incidents. And recovery, which is about restoring services and learning from what happened. And I found that model useful because it shifts the conversations away just from prevention and towards being ready across the full life cycle, which is really what cyber resilience requires. And my thought process changed, like applying technology from the real technologies, the programs, or multiple databases and things like that, to what is the practicality. Like this is the kind of a life cycle management approach, where we could see there is this application of understanding the enterprise with respect to the enterprise architecture, and also understanding the business objectives and how the business architecture could be applied and implied as well. And at the same time, how all of these elements are really connected together to get the right outcomes for the organization. Because within any public sector, as I would see and experienced so far, I've understood that the organizational reputation matters the most, and cybersecurity plays a significant role for it. And from coming from the private sector to the public sector, I have learned this lesson greatly, because technology is just an enabler, and how do we apply that within the business context is the key message.
Yeah, wow, nice. Very thoughtful. Thank you. You have recently written about AI systems doing exactly what they were designed to do while producing unexpected outcomes. Your intent mismatch article. So, without necessarily naming names, could you describe a scenario where that orchestration failure has almost happened? Have you experienced that?
Yes. Uh, there are situations where I have seen that we just want to have a very complex use case in one of the organization, which was a critical one, but at the same time, we didn't have the foundational elements with respect to the data and also the governance, and also the skill set, I would say. And the adoption journey, as much as it seemed to be quite clear in the organization after the initial setup and everything, the organizational AI maturity is not there yet, because for taking these complex AI use cases, the journey is not going to be simpler, because there are so many things, like when we have to scale from proof of concept to pilots and trials, and also to the enterprise-wide scale, it is not that simple. And that is where the real challenge comes, and that is the orchestration problem, I would say, that I have seen, because there are so many aspects to this here. when we talk about the AI readiness and the AI maturity, and there are some use cases like you have referred previously, like the chatbots. Those are the simple use cases where you're using mostly the publicly available information or non-sensitive information. But as the sensitivity and also the information confidentiality keeps increasing, there are so many other factors that needs to be considered, such as how are we going to maintain and manage all of this? Do we have the right data foundations? Is the security set up in such a way that we have all these guardrails and controls being assessed? And do we also have the case structure? And there are so many things related to the ethics, the policies, the regulations, and the legal considerations. So that is where things stall. And also the procurement has become another big challenge, because the orchestration, for a proof of concept could be as simpler, but in the government landscape, the procurement usually takes a little bit more time. And that is one space where things take more time and also causes frustration with the senior leaders and also the managers, where the expectation for something which has delivered quick results is also being with an expectation that things are going to be moving fast with all of those funding arrangements and everything. And there is clear expectations, but there are so many ways that things could actually stall. And I have been in all of those kind of experiences in the past, that there are so many blockers, but at the same time there is always the challenge of how do we take them as a scalable approach, when what works and what doesn't work, and what are the key priorities and what are the key challenges, and having the right senior roles who have the key sponsorship and roles and influence, that makes a good difference too. And with my experience, to be very honest, I found that foundations are the main blockers, like whether it is in cybersecurity or even in any kind of a transformation, because most of the time we will be working on with dealing with the legacy systems and all of those previous traditional controls and things like that. And that is where the real challenge is: how do we transition from those legacy into the future state transformative kind of work? And that actually helps things move seamless once the structure is put in place in the right way.
Yeah, it's funny, those kind of old school systems and processes that have been in place for a long time, they can be difficult for businesses to shake, can't they? Just so foundational and fundamental. I've done a few, you know, I've published a few platforms and programs in different places and in different roles, and especially the wider kind of scale you get, people have been doing something for a long time in a particular way. There's a lot of convincing work to do. And then if you talk about it too early, people might get excited, and you say then, oh, well, I'm sorry, it's going to take us 6 months or 12 months or more to figure out exactly how this will work in the business. Yeah, it's a fun old world to live in with that kind of stuff. Thanks very much for your answer. I appreciate it. Now, you've argued that intent is becoming the critical security boundary for agentic systems. That's correct. How
Yes.
does a leader govern something as abstract as intent when they can't see inside the kind of black box, or can they see inside the black box?
I would always like to suggest some simple playbook here to keep it really very practical. With knowing what matters most, with the critical systems, data, and services. And as I mentioned previously, getting the fundamentals right with respect to the access control, patching, segmentation, monitoring, and also embed the governance into how work actually happens. and also understand where AI is already being used or not just where it is approved. I think we are all aware of the shadow AI and everything else that's happening now, and also agentic AI, like, where AI agents can actually be prompt injected with something that they're not supposed to do. So it's the intent-based agent kind of information that has to be run through with the policy restrictions and also those kind of settings. And also, I would always recommend plan for the incidents, not just for prevention, and also be clear on the third-party dependencies and also the concentration risks. So it is not particularly new, but in the current environment, the discipline to execute these consistently is what matters. So this is what I think where some of the organizations they're trying to get it right in a way that they're treating cyber as a specialized topic rather than an enterprise resilience issue. And the second thing, according to the intent that you have mentioned, as we see that moving faster on AI adoption than on governance and assurance. So when the governance and assurance also becomes part of the AI adoption um, as a blended in kind of a thing with the flow, then it actually becomes like, more clearer with a lot of clarity and also the outcomes with the right intent that they're supposed to generate.
Cool. Great. Thanks. Now, you have also mentioned before that traditional ROI models often fall short for public sector AI. If we aren't measuring the dollars saved, what should we change our North Star to be for measuring that success of a transformation?
So if we are not just talking about the dollar value, the measurement of success would always be how people are adapting and using the technology, and how willing are they trying to uplift the capability of their existing outcomes in the way that they're perceiving things. Because it is always about how the end users want to work with the tool or the technology. And I would say that, for example, chatbot is something that we have led and implemented within the public sector that I talked about previously in the AI innovation program. And although it is not a very complex use case, but it has given a very much big win with respect to the operational officers, where they had to previously go through hundreds and thousands of pages of manuals, where now this has helped them, this tool and technology has helped them with easy accessibility. So there could be some simple wins and quick wins in the AI adoption journey and roadmap. But at the same time, when you have to see the ROI on whether it is dollar value or it is the customer satisfaction or it is the kind of ease of use capability, there are so many factors that needs to be considered, because pretty much within the public sector we can't talk about ROI, mainly because we are not
Sure.
seeing the dollar value of investments. But what is the outcome that is generated is the satisfaction surveys, like how keen the officers want to use this particular technology or application, and how can they take it to a scalability approach where it could be widely used, and where could it really matter to save lives or help communities. So those are the factors that I would consider. But the ROI at the same time, I would also see, rather than investing within the business as usual kind of tools, systems, and traditional, systems and data and all of that, like how about we shift that kind of a mindset to invest it in something that is going to be transformative for the next 5 to 6 years. Like, where do we invest wisely, shifting that from run to the transform kind of a mode. In that way, the teams would have access to better tools, better technologies, and rather than investing on things which are very traditional or a couple of years of years old traditional systems into modernizing systems and tools, and also being able to invest more into this kind of an innovation aspect where we could save hundreds of hours from the officers who are doing admin workflows, for example, and tasks into a little bit more efficient and effective kind of tool sets. So that's where I bring about this kind of, ROI kind of an aspect, like, where to invest and where to divest, and also what is the success rate that we could measure, and also the satisfaction. And at the same time, shaking up those initial foundations, and how can we make it more susceptible to modern tools and technologies, and adaptable, and also um, paying it forward, I would say, like, how do we invest for future by doing the right things now? And that's going to be the key message for particularly ROI when I think about public sector. But within the private sector, it's completely a different kind of a theme. How do we suggest organizations to invest in the right space? Again, like, with their um, basic environments that they have with the hyperscalers, for example, like where do they have their current arrangements and agreements, and what would work well for them in the data ingestion and in those kind of ETL kind of pipelines, and how can they minimize that kind of spending with respect to the cost and compute cost in the network, in the storage, and how can that kind of transformative guidance can help them to use that spending more into the innovation, which would in fact reduce that kind of roles that are no longer required, and also maybe uplifting the team skill set, and also utilizing some of that kind of modern programs, and which could give them much more insights and also value adding to the business improvements. Like there were some organizations who were using only traditional systems, but when this new technology stream has come up with a huge setup of the transformation, it has completely changed their investment on from the technology landscape, which were a couple of $1 million, and also improved their ROI with respect to how they have been using their business applications and systems, and doing things with these agents internally, where they had to do that kind of compliance checks, those kind of security checks, and also improving the efficiencies, the performance management, and all of those. So it's again, like, it's different in the public sector kind of an environment, and also the private sector.
And when you were describing that, I realized I actually hadn't put much thought into what kind of AI tools that frontline sort of services like the police, fire, ambulance, and that kind of thing would be using. Is it kind of what the frontline police officers and ambulance drivers and that kind of stuff would be using? Is it back end systems? Like, what are the kind of some of the projects that you'd need to be implementing in, or is it really back office processes that are seeing the most utilization there?
So I have seen most of the things where administrative workflow issues within the front line, like where the officers have to attend an incident and also come back with the notes, where they have to take down all the notes, prepare police protection notice, for example, to submit it into the court, which takes usually on an average 1 to 2 hours. And what they currently have is the body-worn cameras, where they record all the content. And one of the proof of concept that I have led in this body of work that I have done with the public sector 3 years ago was mostly about how do we extract that information from video to the text, and how can that formatting could be done, and which could help them save a lot of time rather than completely starting a document from scratch. And also preparing a PPN. Instead, how can a technology can enable them? So those kind of things is probably one of the use case, but there are multiple use cases like that the AI tools could be used to help save the manual effort into an automated fashion. And how can we help save that crucial hours of investment by the officers by doing this kind of technology related work, rather than emotionally available with the incidents when there is a real crime that is happening. And this is more of an audit checklist, and also helping them prepare for those kind of, checklist reasons. But instead, if there is this technology of AI, for example, currently, there are so many opportunities, audio to text, video to text, and also how can, we try to extract that kind of an information and put it into a format which they can be used in the respective use cases. And there are many tools that could be used and applied, not just in policing, fire, and emergency, but also predictive analytics, I would say, and in some cases, and also using the data and analytics, for example, the intelligence information, trying to assess the pattern and also the pattern recognition, and trying to extract information from multiple sources of information, and trying to gather some kind of an assessment where things could be prevented, and also where there could be some kind of insights that can be established. And also within AKURIS, we have a very good intelligence information system called SOZE, and that system actually provides a lot of an analysis to understanding the data crucially, which is related to the criminal investigation, for example, which can be applied across multiple different business spaces too. And one of the senior leader mentioned to me 2 years ago, when we first had a demo of this SOZE application, which is pretty much used by policing within UK, and also in some of the organizations in Australia and globally. So the quote that he said was this system is so brilliant that it can find a needle in the haystack. So there are tools which obviously have built-in high intelligence and information into them, where they can understand the patterns, connect the data, and find out where exactly is the problem. Because we can't do things in a manual mode. And there was another technology which we have not trialed, but at least gathered some information, which is fuses by Axon, where we have any kind of a crime that is happening. And this system can actually take the information from the CCTV cameras, and also identify with the kind of information that we are asking, rather than going through the video recording for hours together, for officers to spend 10 to 20 hours before the offender leaves the space. This could actually become so handy to identify if the victim can say that, okay, the offender was wearing a blue shirt and he was 6 foot tall and came back in a black Honda car, those kind of things. There are tools which can actually help the frontline officers in many different ways, and including, I was talking just about the policing, but in the emergency services, if there is a disaster management, and how can we actually get some early signals of information from the bomb, from the weather events and things like that. And I think one of the key experience that I had, which I always go back to, was the 2011 floods, the Toowoomba floods, where Twitter was playing a crucial role, where people were actually posting their current updates, and how the fire and emergency services got that information available, and also use that for some kind of response mechanisms. So there is information, there is data, but how are we using that intelligently by taking that information at the right time? Right information at the right time for the right people is what I would say we can do in this day of AI, because AI can do many things, and the way that we want to apply it and the way that we want to get the outcomes, there are so many opportunities here.
That's really interesting. Like everything from trying to get the frontline people back into the driving the ambulances or driving the police cars so they can be back out helping people, or rather than spending hours in the station trying to figure things out. I mean, even things like providing information back to the hospital from the ambulance, from the ECG machines or whatever they happen to be. Looking at you know, people say lots of crimes happen in the full moon, but like trying to look at different crime data and try and ascertain where crime might be happening more likely than other places or during what periods. That's super interesting. The more you spoke about it, the more I thought, actually, there sounds like there's some really good use cases here. That's yeah, very interesting. Now, uh, there's possibility for overregulation, or there obviously has to be some high regulation. Um, how do you find the line with regulation and innovation? Because
Yes.
all of those things you just spoke about sound fantastic to deploy today, but there must be some hurdles to get through. How do you figure that out, or is it just the government's decision, or what does it look like?
Um, it's a very I mean, I would say this is a great question because one of the biggest trade-offs I think for most of us is speed versus control, right? If you move too slowly, you lose the momentum and value, and if you move too fast without guardrails, you introduce unmanaged risk. And the balance is defining where experimentation is acceptable, where stronger controls are required, and where human oversight needs to be retained. It's not about stopping innovation, but it's about shaping it. And within government that I have seen, they're very kind of they need all of this security in the most significant way that the government reputation is not at risk. So there are policy and performance teams. There are legal teams who also ensure that there is no risk to the organization in implementing any new technology and things like that. And there is this risk management team as well, audit controls teams, all of those teams. And also there is this whole of government QGE architecture and also QGCDG departments who actually overlay the overarching kind of guardrails, policies, guidelines, and all of that, and architectures. So while they're being so cautious, there is always this problem of delay. And when you want to do some innovation, and the delay is not really, acceptable, but it is about finding the right balance between, how do you go with this? And there is this governance, which is again in the government sector that I have seen, although it is the most crucial thing that actually slows you down in a big time. And how do you get the right light touch governance approach and a framework? And this is exactly what I have implemented while I did this AI innovation work at this Queensland Government, because you can't have a traditional governance approach to the innovation model. You need to have a simplified, innovative kind of a governance approach where there is still the security in the center, and also the governance, the compliance, the assurance, and also the innovation. They all need to go hand in hand. And that's where I think there has to be a shift in how do we take the direction. Like, do you really want to do innovation in the old traditional process and method? Or do you want to do innovation much more in a fail fast way? And how do you try to make sure that once you get that kind of an outcome or an output, how do you convince and negotiate the senior leaders to make it an enterprise wide scale? So that is definitely a challenge, but I
Yeah.
think organizations are maturing in that space where most of the organizations now are realizing the benefits of AI and how it actually could help grow their organizations. But at the same time, there are bits of governance, bits of procurement and policies, regulations, and all of those elements which need to go hand in hand. It's all about setting up that kind of an AI governance and a COE framework, and whether it could be distributed or centralized. The model depends upon the organizational appetite, but at the same time, it is also ensuring the maturity where the organization wants to into the next few years.
Well, it sounds like with people like you working at the helm, we're probably in good hands. So it's good to hear. Now, Sandy, this is going to be the closing question for you. So, given your work at the heart of public safety and emergency services, what is the one human capability that we can never afford to outsource to an algorithm, no matter how sophisticated it is?
Sorry, can you repeat that question again,
Sure,
please?
sure, sure. So, Sandy, given your work at the heart of public safety and emergency services, what is one human capability that we can never afford to outsource to an algorithm, no matter how sophisticated that it might be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I would always come back to this. We have this beautiful emotional intelligence, like, where we understand how the dynamics are. And even with respect to an incident example, when two officers go and meet a victim, it is not just about asking a bunch of questions to those victims, it is about understanding the situation, the sense of surroundings, and seeing the expressions. And it is the fulcrum, I would say, that the human's emotional intelligence is really, really, like, very precious, I think, regardless of what technology that comes in, whether it is advanced AI, artificial general intelligence, or super intelligence. But something that can never be replaced is that kind of a human emotional intelligence. And that actually is coming from, decades of culture, context, and that experience and that knowledge which humans have cultivated over many years of experiences, learning from the lessons, and also liaising with people, dealing with different situations in different circumstances and journey. And as much as AI or any technology can actually do things in a much more faster way, and also try to calculate things in milliseconds or microseconds, but there is one thing that I always think is having human in the center, in the loop, for any kind of a decision making. Those kind of things really do matter, because it comes from years of experience and depth. And not just that, it is also about what can actually be considered in that kind of a moment is going to be different for a different situation. There could be some kind of parameters which would change. And I think it is about that. It is really the accountability of a human is at a far more greater space compared to any machine, I would think.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're saying that we can synthesize the brain, but we can't synthesize the heart. It might be another way of putting it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Well, Sandy, I won't take up much more of your time. I always wish these interviews could go on for many more hours than they do, but alas, we've both got to get back to our work. So thank you very much for joining us on the episode today. And next time that you're in Sydney, or next time you want to chat, you're always welcome back. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Hayden.
Thank you.